everyone, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. We are glad that you're joining us today, and we hope that you find this conversation helpful, insightful, and encouraging as you lead your students in ministry. We wanted to stop and remind you, like we always do, about our social media. You can find us at Talk Student Men on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then you can also find us on our website, studentministryconversations.org. So today we are going to do something a little different. And we've done this before, and I honestly think it's probably our greatest feedback we've ever received on an episode. And that is we are doing another recap episode where we are going to look at the last, I believe, 15, 16 episodes, and we are going to talk about our favorite three. And so Russell's going to choose his favorite three episodes, and he's going to talk a little bit about each of them. We'll play a clip from those, and then I will share my three and talk about those a little bit and share clips from those as well. All the links from those clips, where you can find the audio in each of those individual episodes will be in the show notes. So be sure to look at those, and you can find those on our website, Student Ministry Conversations, under this episode, which is episode 35. So with that being said, Russell, dude, like, it's 2022, and last year was crazy. There's been a lot of things that happened in the midst of the pandemonium and chaos of the world. We decided to do a podcast, and now we did 34 episodes, more than half of last year. We were podcasting week to week. And so, like, what is your overall experience so far?
Well, it's been good. And we started this off, right, because we were actually got on a Clubhouse app and we were hanging out with that. And then we thought, let's expand some of these conversations and capture some of that. So it's been great. I've had the opportunity to talk to people that I never thought I would have had the opportunity to talk to. So I'll have a couple of them as my favorites. But I mean, we've interviewed youth leaders who are doing everyday youth ministry beside us in our towns and across the country, just everyday youth workers who are day in and day out in youth ministry and in the trenches, so to speak. We've also interviewed people who we see on stages at National Youth Workers Convention and who've written books. And so it's been really interesting and really fun to have some conversations with people I never thought I would have a conversation with, because I thought, I'd never be able to talk to them. It was also great to have conversations with people who I don't know, who are in a small church in Wisconsin or in Michigan or whatever like that have connected with us somehow through the podcast and have come on. And so I'm really looking forward to kind of highlighting these 6 episodes, but I just want people to know there are 20 something odd other episodes, 29 more episodes up there, and they all have great content and great ways to listen. So don't stop listening with just these 6. Go back, re-listen. Let us know what you're listening to. Let us know what your favorites are. But it has been a joy, and it has been just a continual reminder for me of the great ministry that's going on all across our country. We haven't had an international guest yet, but it's been great to hear all those conversations. So, Brent, I kind of drug you into this. I was doing another podcast, and that had died down, and I started to restart this one. And so I drugged you along. So what's it been like for you coming into this?
Dude, it's been pretty amazing. I have to say that it was rather interesting as an experience for me, because we are going week to week talking with all these different youth pastors that are all awesome, by the way. We've loved every single person that's been on this show, but like, it's also been really, really refreshing and encouraging for me, I hope just as much as other people, because I have found myself going back and listening to the podcasts that I'm in, and just so I can like rehear the words that some of the people have been saying. Talking about spiritual health and everything else that has been going on, doing episodes on like how to navigate life and how to navigate ministry and all this stuff. In all reality, me, like hundreds of thousands of other youth pastors last year, were going through bits of burnout. I was legitimately going through burnout during some of these episodes being recorded. So it was healthy for me, even on top of that. And so just the opportunity to have the moments to kind of come in and look at the nature of like this, we do this just as much for us as we do for everybody else. Like we learn just as much as you guys do. And I think that's the biggest thing for it is it's been refreshing for me. It's been a great impact for my ministry. And I've learned some pretty fantastic things and made some pretty awesome friends along the way. And it's been really, really cool.
Yeah, Brent, just one thing I want to throw in before we continue is that these have been helpful for many different people. And I know that as a senior pastor doing this now, that many of these conversations have been great for me to hear. And I encourage you to listen to these and to share these with someone else who may need them, because they're not just all about youth ministry. I mean, that's the main focus, that's the main goal. But there is so much here that anybody can learn from.
Without a doubt. No, I totally agree. And like I said, it's been super refreshing and encouraging for me. I've loved it. But Russell, let's get to the stuff that everybody's obviously here for. And that's the actual content of the episode. And so we have done quite a few episodes. We've had some tremendously big names as far as youth ministry names, but then also we've had some people that are serving in small town churches that are just absolutely dropping wisdom on us. And so my question to you is, what are your top 3 episodes for this season?
Yeah, so I have 3 episodes that I want to highlight that I thought were very helpful. And as you talked, it's important to remember that everybody had something to share, that you can learn a lot from very different people, no matter whether they are writing books or if they are doing weekly ministry or whatever that is. But I did an interview with Brandon Hare, and Brandon is a student pastor at Calvary Christian Church. He is also with Melissa Glaves, who was a podcast number 6, I believe, on worship. They work at the same church. And so Brandon talks about student leadership. It's our second student leadership podcast. One with Daniel Acton was previous. But he talks about how to get students involved in ministry, how to create room, how he tries to find as many opportunities for students to be involved and to be leaders, to turn things over to them as much as possible. And he shares a lot of the same thoughts that I have on that students can do a lot. And I think I asked him what students couldn't do, and he didn't have a very long list. I mean, students were doing everything from giving messages to leading worship to running screens, leading Bible studies, doing announcements, games. It's a great conversation, and I want to play just a short clip of this here. But I encourage you that there is a whole lot more wisdom dropped in this whole episode other than this short clip. So take a listen.
I think one of the things that I hear from even senior pastors a lot is like, we want more young people in the church. We want more young people in the church. We want to make sure that our church isn't growing old and dying out, right? Like I'm in a church that's 50 years old. So I get that. Like, and my campus is the original building of the church, and we have an older crowd. We want more young people. You are who you platform. Like you are who you platform. If you want more diversity in your church, platform more diversity in your church. If you want more youth presence in your church, platform more youth in your church. And I think sometimes we think that just means we have to just go find somebody from that demographic and throw them up on stage and pray that they don't swear. You know what I mean? But for us, really what that means is pour into their life in such a way that you would trust them with that platform. Like we've been given a huge God has entrusted us with so much, like a huge mission. That's our whole ministry models. We tell every student, like, you matter to God, you matter to us, and you matter to his mission. And that mission is to point other people towards him so that heaven can be fuller and hell can be more empty. And so we've been entrusted to do that. And how do we do that? But man, we got to develop just like disciples who develop disciples. And that's the whole answer, right? Like, man, if you want kingdom growth within your church, start there. Like that's what we look at Jesus's disciples, and most of them were teenagers or early 20s and younger people, right? Like start there. Like let's really pour into that next generation. And we know that if we do that, then we can expect so much kingdom expansion going forward, because let's just face it, they got more energy than us old guys, and like they can, they have more influence now than ever before and more access to people than ever before. And if we can point that towards the gospel, then it will continue to grow, and we'll continue to see kingdom advancement.
Man, that was awesome. That was such a great episode. Brandon was one of my favorites, but it doesn't count on my side because he wasn't my guest. But it was an awesome episode. I really, really loved the insight that Brandon had on honestly a topic that we all deal with, and it's something that in all reality we can all get better at. And so, yeah, what is number 2, Russell? What is your second?
Yes, Sam Halverson is a friend of mine that I met at a youth ministry coaching conference. And so through the Youth Cartel and Marco Stryker, who we have a previous interview with, he did this coaching where you can become certified to be a youth ministry coach. And it was great. And it was the last thing that I did before the pandemic. But I met Sam there. And Sam at the time was a conference youth leader in Georgia, handling a lot of conference youth ministry things. And he has many, many, many years of experience in youth ministry and also in the local church. And so it was great to get to talk to him about his book called One Body, Integrating Teenagers into the Life of Your Church. And his thoughts and ideas are that it's detrimental to separate everybody out into the different age groups, especially on Sunday mornings, to have a youth service and a kids service, or at least that we need to find ways to be one body and communicate and to be one community, and integrating teenagers and students into worship to have them interact with multiple generations of ministry. And so it was a great conversation that kind of challenges some of the current thoughts and ways we're doing youth ministry, but includes research behind it. And he just brings that passion to help everyone in the church to be in youth ministry. Because he points out that when you join the church, especially our church, the Methodist Church, you say that you will order your lives to bring up and to come around these students and these children and to grow them up in the faith. So in our church, in the Methodist Church, most often when someone's baptized, we ask the congregation, will you surround these children and will you order your lives so that you may help bring them up in the faith? And we're making a commitment. So I asked Sam in this clip, I asked him about why he highlighted that in his book. And so here's his answer.
My point of lifting that up in there is that this is a calling of our congregation, and it's not just Christian congregation. I mean, this is ancient. This goes back to the Old Testament. This goes back to the book of Deuteronomy, when God gave directions to the Hebrew people of raising their children and of teaching their children. God didn't say, set aside a few adults in your community who will raise these kids in their faith up to a certain age until they're old enough to be adults. God said, all of you, this is your task to raise these kids, teach them the stories, retell these stories year after year after year. And that's our calling in a congregation as well. We don't say that vow. In that vow, we don't say, with God's help, we will hire somebody who will spend some time with these youth. We say, we will order our lives so that these youth will recognize the Christ in what we do and in us. So that means every person in the congregation is called, and most of them who say these words would be making a vow to stand in the lives of teenagers or children, either one, and help them see what it means to live as Christ, developing those relationships. It's a strong thing. So whenever sorry to interrupt there. So whenever I talk with a church member about and get an opportunity, I'll ask them, what youth are you speaking in? How are you helping our youth in the church today? And realizing that I already know some of those answers. If I come up to one and they haven't been volunteering, often their response is, I'm pretty busy in a lot of things, so I can't volunteer for the youth ministry. And my point there with the question is not that I'm looking for volunteers. In fact, in most cases, I'm not looking for them to be a volunteer. I think one of the most effective things that a congregation member can be is an individual alongside of another youth. So what I'll say is, what about just praying for them daily? Can I give you the name of somebody that you can pray for every single day by name? And that's a great place to start. Another might be, you've got a son in the marching band, and every Friday night you go either to wherever they're playing, and you watch and you cheer them on. I want to tell you 2 other church members who are in that marching band, and ask that when you go to the field, that you look for their parent and you give them some support, and then you say hi to those students. Help them to connect you with the church, and that you are interested in what they're doing. And that's all. I'm not asking you to volunteer. I'm not asking you to put in any more time. It is a little bit harder to chase down that one youth that's in the band, but one of them's playing right next to your own son in the trombone section. So all you got to do is say hi to him as well. And stuff like that. There are all sorts of church members that are interested in some of the things that our youth are interested in. And if we'll connect them, I think that goes a long ways.
Man, once again, great stuff. Love it, love it, love it. So Russell, finally, we are at your 3rd episode. And what is your 3rd most favorite episode this year or this season?
Now, Brent, before we get to that, let me just say that it was thoroughly unfair that we could only pick 3. There are so many great interviews, and I encourage everybody to go back and listen to all the others. But since I can only pick one more, I want to choose an interview I did with one of the great minds in youth ministry that I have followed for a very, very long time, read his books and been to seminars. And that is a guy by the name of Walt Mueller. And he is the head of the Center for Parent and Youth Understanding. And they are a wealth of research and knowledge into youth and youth culture, and how we can equip parents to be the faith influence in the lives of their students. And so please go check out cpyu.org. So many great things for parents and youth leaders there. But we talk about some of their research that they have done into youth ministry and youth culture, and what they are seeing as far as trends and influences in the lives of students. What are the things that students are drawn to or attracted to, and how we can continue to help parents and youth leaders to work together to be part of that discipleship process in the lives of their students. So I hope you do go check them out and see everything they have to offer. But in the meantime, take a listen to just a short clip from my interview with Walt Mueller.
And part of it is we can get so swept up in the current youth ministry culture that we think what everybody's talking about is everything that we should be doing. And so much of what we're talking about are not the things that we should be talking about in youth ministry, that we get wrapped up in, curating our meeting space. We get wrapped up in using the latest technology. We get wrapped up, in this, that, and the other thing. And we sometimes just don't realize how important things are, or some of these important things slip because we just don't have time. So there's the ignorance factor. And I use that word ignorance, we just don't know. But there's also, I think, sometimes a timidity factor where we're timid, like, I don't have kids. These parents, they could be my parents. What am I going to say, or what am I going to do? And that's where I think you can't forfeit your influence on parents because you haven't parented yet. You can be a dot connector. So if you go out and you look for what the best resources are that are out there, as you're listening to parents to find out what it is that they're hoping they can get connected with, you can serve to resource them that way. Just get things in their hands that are helpful. I do think for a small number of youth workers, there's a third factor, and sometimes that's the arrogance factor. And, my generation of youth workers I don't think there's very few of us who I think were intentionally arrogant. I just think it was a functional arrogance that for some reason we believed we could do it better. And, it's kind of like, you're a dad, right? So you and I both knew a heck of a lot more about parenting before we had kids. I mean, that holds true for everybody, right? And I mean, that always cracks me up, and you just have to repent of that. I mean, even not just things you said to others, but the thoughts I had about parents over the years, like, why don't they do this, or why don't they do that, or if they only did this or that, give me your kid and I'll fix your kid. No, it doesn't work that way. So, again, it does not matter how young you are. You can resource parents. You don't have to teach them about how to parent, but you can get the right resources in their hands and connect them to the things that they really need.
Man, I mean, if you've been in youth ministry for any long stint of time, hopefully you know who Walt is. He's a fantastic dude. He speaks at most of the big name youth ministry conferences. He's had his feet in the water in youth ministry for a really, really long time. And honestly, he does a service for youth pastors that is really far and above anybody else that does it. And that is his interaction with parents. If you aren't familiar with Walt, you need to go check him out. You need to go look at his resources. Russell, what was that website one more time?
Yeah, the website is cpyu.org. And there's lots of stuff there for parents and youth leaders and research and articles. And so I hope you go check that out. So Brent, now it's your turn. You picked out some episodes and some conversations that you said were your favorites. And so why don't you share with us what you have chosen for us today?
Man, I hate to be put on the spot. Like you said a little bit ago, it is one of those things that, like, when we come to this episode in our lineup, it's like, oh, well, that one was good. That one was good. That one was good. Man, I really, really liked that one. And then, like, your pick 3 ends up being like 7 or 8 of the probably not 8 episodes that we both did. And so legitimately, they're all fantastic, and we can't put them all in the top list. But I have to say that 3 probably did stick out. And it's not necessarily because they had a better topic or anything like that, or it was a better person that we interviewed or anything, but they were just 3 that impacted me the most. And so I would have to say that the 3 would be starting with my first episode after our last recap episode, which was Cody Brotherton. I sat down with Cody and we talked about contemplative ministry. And so it was a really, really cool, really cool reminder just to kind of allow yourself to be still, allow yourself to find opportunities for calm in the middle of everything else and all the chaos that's going on, whether it be in your own personal life or in your ministry or anything else. Like, that is what God commands us to do time and time again, is be still and know that I'm God. And so we talked about how can we take ministry into a scenario where the bells and the whistles and lights and guitars and everything are taken away, and how can we focus in and genuinely teach our students to have this worship focus that is completely by themselves, completely where they are contemplating who Jesus is, what Jesus means to them, and the impact that has not only on your students, but on you as well. And so this is just a really short clip. Seriously, you have to go listen to this whole episode. It was awesome. But here's a short clip from that episode.
I'm just going to say it, right? We live in a very, preaching-centered philosophy of the gospel in our churches. And we are the experts as ministers. So I'm a minister. I'm including myself in this. A lot of times we posture ourselves as we're the people that you need to listen to. I've studied this more. I'm the expert. listen to me preach for 40 minutes. And this is, this is what's going to be very spiritually forming for you as a congregant. And everybody has to examine that model of ministry for themselves, and there's good things in it. And I'm not here to say that the Holy Spirit is very active in that process, and sure, definitely it is. And so, I think the contemplative approach is just different in that silence is so critical. And so, again, it's our American culture of doing versus just being is really what you have to take into account. And so we are so focused on doing Christianity and doing everything that we're called to do, or we think we're called to do, that we forget that we're human beings, not human doings, right? I had a seminary professor tell me that, and that always stuck with me. And so, what's the name of God? I am that I am. God is being, right? And so I like to tell people, Jesus is the vine, we are the branches. And we don't need to look so close. Where does that divide? Well, I would say Jesus is not saying there's a division there. That if we flow from the mind of Christ, we become an extension of the being of God. And so we have to learn how to be children of God. We have to learn how to be disciples of Christ that are royal priesthood.
Well, Brent, that was a great episode and one I enjoyed listening to. And as I was editing it, and it reminded me too that we shouldn't just keep those things in mind about creating that space and leaving room for God in our ministries, but also for ourselves as we continue in ministry and ways that we can refresh ourselves in doing that. So, well, that was your first episode. So what is your second clip that you have for us today?
Yeah, so my second episode was one of two episodes for this string of episodes that I actually found my guest on TikTok, which is kind of crazy to say, but the second interview has to be Dustin Phillips. And if you missed that episode, Dustin Phillips is a professional video game streamer, but he's also a children's pastor in East Texas, and he is serving in a church that legitimately backed and completely supports his video game stream ministry. And so he has a legitimate streaming setup in his church office, and he streams from his office. And it's super, super awesome. But we sit down and we talk for a little bit about the importance of how to incorporate video games in ministry. And a lot of people would be like, well, video games, why would we want video games in our ministry? That doesn't make sense. Sure, we have the Xbox in the corner or the Nintendo Switch or whatever, but that's just so the kids have something to do. But we talk about the intentionality behind it of when's the last time that you actually sat down on the couch and played with them? When was the last time that you actually took the time to get over there and create community out of something that your kids are interested in as much as video games? Video games have a tremendously huge following. They have a tremendous impact on any teenager. It doesn't matter who you are, because most people play video games, whether it's on your cell phone or whether it's on a console, computer, or whatever. And so how can you take the games that your kids are playing and use it to build more conversations and build more equipping opportunities for kingdom work? It was a tremendously fantastic episode. I loved it a lot. Dustin is a tremendous guy. You should definitely go follow him. His handle on Facebook is Pastor Dustin, or you can just find him Dustin Phillips. But he still does live streaming. And so you should definitely check it out, but also check out the episode. It's awesome. You can find the show notes on that episode for all of his following stuff as far as his video game streaming, but really, really great episode. And here's a short clip.
Yeah, it's a special moment. You'll see that kids or youth or even, other young adults who maybe are a little more shy, a little more introverted, typically aren't opening up and going and starting a conversation with the other people in their local church, but they see a video game that they enjoy or just a game they're curious about. They want to go play, and you'll see them open up so much more whenever you're providing some kind of an experience that they're used to, that they're comfortable with, that they enjoy. And so being able to sit down and play, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch with, 3 teenagers or whatever, where maybe they're not, if we're just kind of hanging out pre-service and there's nothing like that, they might just be kind of standing off by themselves, a little quiet, a little shy, but now they're laughing, they're having fun, and I'm able to connect and build relationship with them. That's such an important piece of what church is about. I mean, we're supposed to come together not only to worship, to pray together, to hear the word of God, do all those kind of things, but to do life together, to be accountable to each other, to help each other through life, to do those kind of things. And if there's no relationship there between people of all ages, then the church family becomes very segmented, and that's obviously not something you want in your church. So it's just a way to bridge the gap between generations, between people who might not easily open up. As a more introverted person myself, I can think back to when I was a kid. I would have been in that exact same kind of situation. I would have been very if I was in a new setting and I didn't know anybody at a church, I'd just kind of be off by myself, eating 14 pieces of pizza until they say, all right, let's start the service. And like, okay, finally. All right, here we go. But if there's something fun like that, if they, busted out a Super Nintendo, hey, I'm all over it. And, you better beat me to get me off the system, So it's just a great tool to be able to connect with the people in your church. And I think a lot of people kind of demonize it and think it's, that's a distraction, that doesn't belong here. And but really it's just a tool like anything else. And I think it's a great way to build relationship and to bridge that gap.
So yeah, guys, go check that out. Go check out Pastor Dustin, see what he's doing. And listen to the whole episode. As all these are good to listen to the whole thing, not just the clip. So Brent, you have one more episode that you want to share with us for today. So tell us what that one is.
Yeah, so this last episode probably has been the most joy-filled episode for as far as podcast recording that I've done on the entire podcast. And yes, I totally, back when we were doing our Clubhouse app stuff, when we were trying to get out into the community a little bit and talk to different youth pastors and stuff like that, a man by the name of Jerry Varner was one of the first guys that we met on Clubhouse. And we were like, hey, dude, when we get this podcast started, we'd love to have you on the podcast. Due to scheduling and for some rhyme or reason not getting to his episode for the first little while, I finally got to sit down with him, even though Russell totally did try and schedule the episode. I got to do the episode, and man, oh man, Jerry is just one of the guys that like you can feel the heartfelt emotion that he has for student pastors. And he has been in the ministry for a long time, youth ministry his entire career. And he's honestly been in youth ministry as long as I've been alive, which is pretty crazy to think about. But he is passionate. He is a dynamite speaker. He has some tremendous thoughts and ideas from his experience in youth ministry. And that was the conversation. We just sat down and we talked about longevity in student ministry and how to stay active and engaged for long term in the role of youth ministry. Jerry has no plans of quitting youth ministry. He has no plans of getting a real job and being a pastor or anything like that. He genuinely feels that he is called to youth ministry, and he said he hopes that he can do it for the rest of his life as long as God allows him to, which is awesome. And it's great for us to hear in a world where a lot of us kind of feel like our position as a youth pastor is a stepping stone. It's not really a real position. And it's just a really refreshing moment to kind of sit and say, hey, yeah, I can do this forever, and here's how. So here's a short clip from Jerry's episode, but you have to go back and listen to this whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think student pastors who are looking for a church would really do themselves a favor by doing some research as to the history of student ministry in that particular church before you jump in. And you can easily spot trouble. I guess it's okay to use that, troubled churches or troubled hiring and firing processes. So, but yeah, I completely agree. I think that we have something to do about it as well. And I think having an attitude of I'm going to pastor that congregation. And there have been times throughout my 16 years here, 17 years here, that every once in a while someone would say, Jerry, would you ever like to have your own church? And I understand the question, and I can respect it, I can appreciate it, but there was this light bulb moment that I had a long time ago that said, I do have a church. I have a congregation. I have a congregation of middle school and high school students, and God has called me to shepherd that congregation. And I think churches sometimes, especially the board or the hiring team or whomever, they might be looking more for like kind of a cruise director or an activity coordinator or to fill the calendar with stuff for kids to do, rather than who can pastor these young people, because the need of a 12-year-old is vastly different than a need from a 45-year-old. And so you need a pastor who's kind of specialized in that area of pastoring the middle school and high school students. So that's my mindset. Like, I feel like I do have a church. I don't have my own building. Thank God. I'm actually, as student ministry pastors, we're in the best possible situation. We're guarded from a lot of the politics and, the muck of the senior pastorate, but yet we still get to have a congregation of our own. And it doesn't matter if that congregation is 3 kids or 300 kids. Like, we get to be a pastor to those kids. And so taking that mindset of being a pastor, but then also being willing to flex and to morph and to change with the needs of each generation and each year goes by. I think we obviously have to hold on tight to the message, but we have to barely hang on to the method of how we do it. I can tell you, I am not doing student ministry the way that it was being done 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, definitely, from when I started, because I have had to grow with the culture and the felt needs of the students and the families that I'm ministering to.
Well, Brent, I am so glad that you captured that episode and you were able to talk to Jerry. And it's great to hear those who continue to do youth ministry. And I think we all have a heart to continue in some form or fashion that looks different ways. Now I'm serving as a senior pastor at a church, but I'm still getting the opportunity to pour into and coach other leaders. And it's great to have those opportunities and to see those who have that passion. And I hope that I have passion for ministry. As long as Jerry has passion for ministry that he is doing. So, well, Brent, I'm going to throw you a curveball. This is not something we discussed, not something we put on the list, but what I would like to know is out of all of the episodes we've done, those that we recorded at the very beginning and all the way up to number 35 now, what were 2 of the ones that I recorded that were your favorites, and then I will share 2 of the ones that you recorded that were my favorites.
So parameters, are we talking like the entire podcast but we're talking both?
Yeah, I said both seasons from 1 to 35, like whichever ones, if right now is your favorite one. So whichever ones from both seasons.
Oh gosh. Now you're going to make me go back and dig through some history. Just a second. Well, I'm gonna do one that you didn't mention last season, which, I mean, hands down, he's one of my favorite dudes ever in the game as far as youth ministry, and that's Mark Ostreicher. His episode was awesome, but I am a big time nut when it comes to leadership development and anything that can make me a better leader. So I listen to Carey Nieuwhof. I listen to a lot of Marco. And so Marco's episode on developing yourself as a leader was fantastic. That was such a great episode. And then from this set of episodes, I would probably have to say that my favorite episode that you did not mention, which is a terrible, terrible parameter to this, is, man, I'm going to be honest. I'm probably going to have to go with Tom Crozier, collaborating in youth ministry. Now Tom is a youth pastor, or he works with youth up in Chicago in a very, very different realm than most of us work in. And it honestly probably leads to some of the most amazing and compelling stories because of how he does. And so if you're familiar, or if you're not familiar with that episode, you need to go listen to it. But tremendous episode. Tom was a great guy. And he actually is the long-standing listen record holder right now. But that beside the point, his episode was fantastic. There's a reason that he has so many listens. You should definitely give it a listen if you have the time. So Russell, I'm going to turn the question on you now. One from the summer months before our first recap that I did not mention, and then one from the summer months until now that I did not mention.
All right. I guess it's only fair, since I did it to you, that you get to do it to me. So my two, let me think, from the first season was, I think, Joe Roberts. And Joe talked about partnering with youth sports. And so a lot of times we look at, as youth ministers, as pastors, we see youth sports as kind of the enemy, right? It's taking away our kids on Wednesday night or whatever. But Joe really challenged me to look at what are the opportunities in that, whether that's getting involved, whether that's visiting kids, doing sports, whether that's taking that time to spend a little extra time and see what they're involved with and what they're excited about. And so how can we see youth sports, whether that's school or whether that's club or whatever, what are the opportunities that exist in that? And how can we bring Christ into those situations and support them and their families and those opportunities? So, and the second one was Jessica Geiger. And Jessica is a TikTok youth pastor. She's on there, very active. That's kind of how we ran into her. But she also is just finishing her bachelor's degree. She just finished that almost a few days after you recorded. But she's also exploring her call to ministry. What does it mean to be in ministry, in youth ministry? And then y'all talk about how we can help students discover their call to ministry. How do we help them to discover what it is that God's calling them to do, and then to provide them the opportunities to help them to refine that call and live that call out. So it was a great, great episode. And I am so glad that you captured that. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from her in the future. So, I mean, I think we've mentioned 10 different episodes so far with this recap show. And so it's a little longer than our last recap, but I want to remind those who are listening, that's 10 out of 35 episodes. So there's still, more episodes for you to dive into. And we've only given you some clips and some recaps. So I encourage you to go back to the beginning, listen all the way through, and leave some comments, leave some ratings, leave some comments and leave some ratings. Leave some comments and leave some ratings, and also tell us what's your favorite, and then tell other people about those as well.
Yeah, and then the other side of that is, if you listening to this podcast are like, hey, I have something to throw into the conversation. I have a topic that I love to talk about with about youth pastors or with youth pastors. We'd love to hear from you. You can message us on any of the social medias and get that set up to start. That is primarily how we connect with just about all of our guests on our show. Either we reach out to them on Facebook or Instagram, or they reach out to us and they're like, hey, I love what you're doing. I'd love to be on your show. And then sometimes also other podcast hosts will come in, like Kyle Creel with the Small Town Youth Ministry podcast. He came in and he was like, hey, I love what you're doing, Russell. Why don't you come sit in on my podcast and I'll come sit in on your podcast? And so we're totally fine with swapping episodes. And we actually have a few of those coming up in the process, and we're excited to get those out as well. But we want everybody's voice to be heard. That was the big ticket and the big idea behind this, is we have all hopefully been to those big youth ministry conferences where we've been in the big room with 500 to 5,000 youth pastors, where there's one person on stage talking about this idea or this concept. But we really noticed that what happens and where the life change happens is sitting in the hotel lobby later with those 2 to 3 youth pastors talking about that big room talk. And so that's all we're trying to do with this, is we're trying to have conversations to where we can just sit down and break down topics and discuss things that are happening. And it's been one of my favorite things I've ever done. I have absolutely loved being on this show. And we hope that y'all have enjoyed it just as much as we have. So with that being said, with this being the recap, we are kicking off our third string of episodes for the first year. And so this will be covering our spring until April 1st, when we hit our full first year of podcasting, May 1st, and our first full year of podcasting. We are super excited. And of course, as we get closer to that anniversary episode, we'll let you know. But man, it's been such a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun. And we are so thrilled that y'all have decided to be on this trip with us. And so Russell, you have the first episode of the spring. What are you going to be doing?
My first episode will be talking with Alan Lightscow. And Alan is a youth director in Livingston, Texas, but he has experience taking youth on foreign mission trips. And so we're going to be talking about what all goes into that, some things you need to think about, some ideas, some things you may not know, and some tips and tricks for that, and also why we take them on mission trips, and how to keep the focus where the focus needs to be. So really important. I think will be a great episode leading into our summer, and because you probably need to be thinking about your mission trips right now. So I hope you join us, and it'll be great.
Man, that sounds great. Hey, I can't wait to hear that conversation next week. Just a reminder, be sure to go to studentministryconversations.org for show notes and links from this episode. Just search for this week's episode number in the search bar. We also have other helpful articles and blog posts on there as well. Again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the ride for the past 35 episodes. And we look forward to seeing you next week.